Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. This is the final video of the construction of my Fokker Dr.1. In the previous videos I built the cockpit, the engine with the wooden propeller, and of course the final assembly of the aircraft. I also told the story of this fascinating aircraft. If you haven't seen these build videos, please check them out after this video. The links are in the description. With PVA glue I glued the grass mat onto the base, but it was too uniform in texture. Using a flathead tweezers I chipped off the grass, making it patchy. Once I was satisfied with the grass, I began working on the mud. I know there are a bunch of diorama materials, and I didn't have any. I imitate the earth and mud texture by using dissolved putty. I know it's far from the same, but my goal was to create an uneven surface at the spots where I had eradicated the grass. I used an old tatty brush to apply the putty. If this putty is too thick for you, use a bit of leveling thinner to make it thinner. I let it dry completely and then I began painting the base. I used various green and brown paints. The original tone of the grass mat was somewhat yellowish, so I first added deep green to create a greener appearance. I concentrated the green tone on the grass patches. For muddy patches, I wanted to build the tone layer by layer. I started with the mid-brown tone. I used the Tamiya flat brown. Then I shaded it with a lighter tone and I used Tamiya's flat earth. Originally, I hadn't planned to create base underneath the aircraft, but later I changed my mind. I wanted to place the Fokker on a slightly muddy meadow, but not that soaky muddy, just a little bit. I like it when the base isn't too big and doesn't distract from the aircraft. I used the same rectangular base as I did under the Soffit Camel. It's a 150 by 150 square wooden base. And then came the big surprise. I realized that the only pigment I had at home wasn't the right shade at all. European earth, which is a very light pastel brown. I needed a dark deep brown tone that would match my idea of a dark muddy meadow. Never mind, I used what I had. I figured out how to fix it as I went. So I applied the pigments to the muddy patches, almost perfectly covering the brown shades I had carefully created beforehand. I'm not an expert on dioramas, so I watched a couple of videos from Night Shift or LPJ models or from Workbench Hobbies. Workbench Hobbies has an excellent video about a muddy winter diorama that he just posted recently. I highly recommend watching it. I put the link in the description below. Unfortunately, I realized that I didn't have the necessary knowledge and proper materials. Never mind, I plan to make something very simple with a couple of extra details from the materials I have. After the pigment was applied and dried, I began recreating the brown tone I had previously created. Flat brown, dark earth, NATO black and a mixture of brown shades. For the final step, I oversprayed the muddy area with a few layers of wet clear coat. I wanted to achieve a surface that resembled a drying but still slightly wet mud surface. Now the base was complete. I set it aside and began working on the additional details. I noticed that the original photographs showed the ground crew using wooden platforms, ladders and small stools during maintenance. Additionally, it was common for the tail of the aircraft to be placed on a small wooden platform to lower the engine, making it easier to access for maintenance. Therefore, I planned to build a platform for the tail, a step platform for the pilot and wheel chocks. I started with the step platform for the cockpit. I used evergreen styrene profiles in various sizes. For gluing, I like to use Tamiya whitecap cement, which gives me more time to set the parts. I also like to use extra thin cement, which offers a quick set. I built a platform for the pilot, but I didn't like the 3 steps version, so I quickly built a new 4-step platform. I wanted to create these platforms with the correct size, so I used a 1/48 scale figure as a reference and precise measurements. 1 mm in 1/48 scale reality is equivalent to 48 mm. Conversely, real-life size needs to be multiplied by 0.02083 to achieve the 1 in 48 scale size. For example, a 1.8 meter tall person, which is 1800 millimeters, is 37.5 millimeters scaled down to 1 in 48 scale. I always start the construction with the total height that I need, then I calculate back to the 1 in 48 reality. I try to keep the dimensions as realistic as possible. For the wheel chokes, I followed a picture again. It's a relatively simple design, nothing special. I've seen this type of wheel chokes in multiple images, so I guess it was a common type. The little platform for the tail was also a relatively simple wooden structure, a 4-legged tall stool. According to the pictures that I saw, there was no standard maintenance equipment for the ground crew at the time. They used whatever they had or they could. Especially on the German side, the resources were quite limited, so if they had no wheel chokes, no worries, they used a simple sandbag. Practicality was the most important. Painting wooden effect is quite easy. For the base color, I used Tamiya's wooden deck tan, which is a perfect tone for either dark or mid-tone wooden texture. I painted all of them in this base color, and for the wood grains I used oil paints. 502 Eptyling oil paints are my favorite. I used to use artist's oil paints, but I prefer Eptyling because of the premixed colors, the smooth consistency and the delicate texture. Also, it dries much quicker than my previous sets of oil. If you haven't tried them, I highly recommend them. I used ochre, light rust, dark rust and raw umber. The primary color for the tail support platform was the ochre, and the dark grain tones were the light rust. For the pilot step platform I used dark rust, and for the darker shades I used raw umber. I always like to use the design thinner for the products, so I used Eptyling 502 odorless thinner. My good friend gave me a small toolbox and an oil can. Thank you, mate, you are a legend. I painted the box red and I painted the oil can orange. I didn't find proper information about an age-appropriate oil can, so I used my artistic imagination to create it. I made the motor oil label on it sloppy, as if it were handwritten. To be honest with you, I didn't like it, so I repainted 4 or 5 times until I was satisfied with my work. I tried Vallejo acrylic black grey and I also tried a black Posca marker. Both of the methods were good, maybe the marker was easier than the brush. The next little accessories that I made was a watering can. I thought that it was easier for the maintenance crew to use a watering can to pour oil into the machine than to pour it from the large can. I used Albion Alloy's brass tubes in various sizes. I sliced a piece of 4mm tube for the body of the can. Initially, I tried to use a brass sheet for the bottom, but it wouldn't stick to the tube, so I skipped it and I glued it to a piece of styrene sheet instead. I shaped the bottom into a right circular shape with a file. The nozzle of the can was a 0.8mm tube. I cut the right size with a hobby knife and shaped it to the angle with a diamond-coated file. The handle of the can was a 0.5mm tube. I used the same 4mm tube to shape it, and then I used pillars to form the final shape of it. For gluing, I used simple superglue. I added a bit of patina to it using Eptyling 502 Sepia oil paint. I also added a few drops of clear yellow to mimic the oil inside. The clear yellow was also perfect for weathering the oil can. I love this little watering can. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. I I strongly recommend checking as many photo references on the internet as you can. We can learn a lot about these aircraft, ground crew and maintenance. I saw in one of these photos that there was a long rope attached to the wheel choke. Very clever, the ground crew didn't have to go close to the spinning propeller to take the wheel choke out. Smart and safe way to do it. I glued the wheel chokes on the base with gel superglue. The beige sewing threads that I used looked too clean on the muddy surface. So with oil paint I painted them to look more dirty, used, so more realistic. I used gel superglue to glue all of the diorama elements to the base. PVA glue also does the job, but I preferred a stronger bond. If the part is weightless, PVA glue is just perfect, but in this case I preferred superglue. After gluing the individual elements, I covered the glue points. It is so ugly when the glue is visible. PVA glue is very good in this respect, as it becomes transparent after drying, but the bond is not too strong. Superglues made for modeling also dry transparently, but these products are quite expensive. My favorite superglue is a cheap one from a local hardware store, and it dries transparently, so it's perfect. It is difficult when the environment is clean and we cannot really cover up the mistakes with mud, dirt or weathering. For example, on a clean concrete runway, it would look silly if I made the bottom of the ladder muddy to cover the glue points. In my case, it was easy, since I was working on a muddy base. Therefore, I only had to weather the glue points to hide the unwanted spots, and thus made the elements even more lifelike. Again, I used a well-proven Abteilung oil products. The other advantage of oil paints, when you want to imitate mud, apply it thickly to the surface without thinning it. It imitates the mud effect perfectly, while if you thin it, you can shade it nicely. I made a small plug for the front of the base. I've been using this method for a while now, so I did it this way again. I designed the size, the shape and the text with the appropriate font on my computer. I downloaded the Fokker company logo from Wikipedia. Here I found something interesting. The Fokker company did not have a logo during World War I. Even after the war, they just painted a giant Fokker inscription on the side of the airplane. The first real logo appeared in the early 1920s. It's a circular emblem divided horizontally. The top orange half bears a royal crown, respected its status as royal, and the lower blue half features the Fokker script, a flowing signature logo derived from Anthony Fokker's handwriting. So I used this first logo from the early 1920s, which is not age appropriate for my DR1, but please don't tell this to anyone. This is our little shared secret. After I was pleased with the design, I printed it out on a sticky paper. Then I put it on a 0.5mm styrene sheet. I cut it around and fixed the edges with a black marker. I drilled the holes, 2 on the plug and the same 2 on the base for the 2 brass nails. Gluing, I used gel superglue. First I placed 3 fuel drums at the corner of the base, but later I changed my mind. I thought it looked too busy, so I took one of them off. Because I use superglue as I mentioned earlier, when I took one of the barrels off, obviously it tore the grass mat off from the base. Never mind, it took me an hour or 2 to fix it, but then it was exactly how I wanted. The bucket I put next to the barrels is also from my friend. Thank you again. I wanted to put a rag in it so that it would hang over the side. I cut a piece of tissue paper, cut it out and folded it into the desired shape. Then I dropped Tamiya clear into the silver painted bucket. I put the tissue in, which absorbed the varnish. I also soaked the loose part with varnish, which stuck it to the bucket's wall. I shaped the loose rag part with a pair of tweezers and weathered it a little bit. But really just a bit. I wanted a bucket with clear water. I made the handle of the bucket from 0.2mm lead wire. I like to use lead wires, very easy to shape them and cut them. I folded into a half circle shape, then cut with a hobby knife. I glued it to the top of the bucket with superglue. After gluing it to the base, I filled with Tamiya Clear. Clear shrinks significantly after drying, so even if you fill the bucket full, it will probably dry to half of the original size, but it will still be shiny. I glued it to the base with a drop of gel superglue. This was a really fun project. The kit was excellent and I had no issues with it despite it released over 20 years ago. The build was really easy. The most problematic area with World War I aircraft is fitting the wings and the numerous bracing wires between the wings. The DR1 has 3 wings but no bracing wires, which made the build much easier. I would definitely recommend it to modelers who want to try World War I aircraft but have always been put off by the structural complexity. The paint scheme was a bit challenging, but there are simple schemes also available, and you can also get full surface decals, so you don't have to paint complicated patterns. Next time I will probably go a little further in the timeline of history and choose a topic from the World War II era. The DR1 was definitely not my last World War I aircraft. I have unbuilt World War I kits in my stash. I hope you enjoyed this build series and had a good time. Please consider liking and subscribing with the little bell and you won't miss the following videos. Your support means a lot to me and helps the channel grow. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comment section. Thank you for watching, keep modeling, and see you next time.